All right, welcome to this explainer. Today we're doing something a little different. We're setting aside the politics, the emotion, all the noise, to dive strictly into the historical facts and the sheer legal mechanics of India's most complex Supreme Court ruling. We are going to decode the monumental 1,045-page Ayodhya verdict, and we'll be relying entirely on the raw court documents, official government reports, and the archaeological survey of India's actual findings.
Okay, let's jump right into our agenda. We've got a structured timeline to get through today. First, the 2.77-acre dispute. Then centuries of conflict, the political escalation, the 1992 demolition, unearthing the evidence, and finally, that massive final court verdict.
Right. Section 1, the 2.77-acre dispute. Specifically, plot number 583, a tiny plot of land.
To really grasp the sheer scale of this nationwide dispute, we actually have to zoom way in. Think about this. Out of a massive surrounding 67.7-acre area, this entire centuries-old conflict is anchored to just 2.77 acres. And the actual disputed structure, it occupied a mere 0.313 acres. It is honestly mind-blowing that such a microscopic piece of real estate became the focal point of India's longest-running, most consequential legal battle.
Now here is where it gets truly fascinating. The main litigant in this massive real estate dispute wasn't a trust, and it wasn't an organization. It was actually the deity, Lord Ram himself. Under Indian law, deities can be treated as living juristic entities. That means they are fully capable of owning property and fighting for their rights in court. Because of this, Ram Lalla literally had his own legal file in the Supreme Court and was officially represented by a human proxy. How interesting is that?
Moving on to Section 2, Centuries of Conflict. We're tracing the flashpoints here.
To understand how on earth we arrived at that modern courtroom, we've got to trace the history, because tensions over this exact spot simmered slowly over hundreds of years. It starts back in 1528 when the Babri Masjid was constructed by the Mughal commander Mir Baqi. Fast forward to the 1800s, the British step in. By 1838, a British administrator named Martin officially documented the competing claims, noting in his surveys that a temple had predated the mosque. Well, that formal realization led to some serious, real-world escalations. We see major recorded clashes in 1853 and again in 1855, which tragically resulted in 75 casualties.
So what did the British do to stop the violence? In 1857, they essentially drew a line in the sand by building a 6 to 7 foot brick and grill dividing wall. They created a literal, spatial split. The inner courtyard was designated for Muslims to offer namaz inside the main structure, while the outer courtyard, specifically the Ramchabutra platform, was given to Hindus for worship. Remember this wall, because this physical division becomes the absolute crux of literally all the future legal battle.
As we roll into the 20th century, the tension just completely boils over. Incidents kept mounting. In 1858, you had Nihang Singhs entering the mosque and writing Ram inside. Then in 1885, the very first court case to build the temple on the outer platform was dismissed. In 1934, the mosque was damaged during riots over cow slaughter, and then the massive turning point, December 1949, when idols of Ram Lalla mysteriously appeared inside the central dome. Fearing absolute chaos and mass riots, the government stepped in immediately, locked the inner gates entirely, and basically froze the conflict in place.
All right, Section 3, Politics and the Escalation. This is where it becomes a national movement.
With the gates locked and official lawsuits filed by groups like the Sunni Waqf Board and the Nirmohi Akhara, this localized legal dispute quickly mutated. In 1986, things shifted dramatically. A local court abruptly ordered the gates unlocked for Hindu worship. But what makes this absolutely crucial is the speed. I mean, within 40 minutes of that verdict, the locks were opened and the whole thing was broadcast live on national television. Talk about throwing gasoline on a fire. This move single-handedly dragged the Ayodhya dispute right to the absolute forefront of national politics.
You can see a very clear step-by-step path of escalation from here. In 1989, foundation stones were laid using over 3.5 lakh, that's 350,000 bricks collected from villages all across India. The very next year, a massive 10,000-kilometer chariot procession, the Rath Yatra, mobilized millions before authorities finally halted it in Bihar. By 1991, the newly elected state government just flat-out acquired the 2.77 acres under the pretext of tourism. It was clear, political factions were weaponizing this dispute to mobilize the masses in a way the country had literally never seen before.
Section 4, the 1992 demolition.
a catastrophic day.
All of that intense political maneuvering we just talked about, it ultimately culminated in a single day that forever altered India's trajectory. Despite clear, written assurances given to the Supreme Court that only a symbolic ceremony would take place, December 6, 1992 unfolded entirely differently. By 11:30 a.m., over 150,000 volunteers, known as Kar Sevaks, advanced toward the disputed structure. Security forces were completely, utterly overwhelmed. At 1:55 p.m., the first section fell, and by 4:49 p.m., the entire 16th century structure was leveled completely to the ground.
The shockwaves from that afternoon were devastating, and they were global. Deadly riots immediately erupted across major Indian cities like Mumbai, Gujarat, and Delhi, tragically claiming over 2,000 lives. And the retaliation didn't stop at the border. 30 Hindu temples were destroyed in Pakistan and 11 more in Bangladesh. It was pure chaos. The central government had to step in with severe measures, dismissing several state governments and stepping in to legally seize the entire 67.7-acre surrounding area in 1993 just to maintain some semblance of order and stop further land grabs.
Okay, Section 5. Unearthing the evidence. Science enters the court.
So here's the huge problem. With the physical structure completely gone, how do the courts actually determine who owned those 2.77 acres? Well, they turned to science. In 2003, the High Court ordered the Archaeological Survey of India, the ASI, to literally dig for the truth. They used high-tech ground-penetrating radar to scan the earth beneath the site, being super careful not to disturb the makeshift central shrine. That scan kicked off 6 solid months of incredibly careful, scientifically monitored excavation.
And what did they find down there? The ASI report handed the court hard physical evidence of a large, pre-existing non-Islamic structure buried beneath the site. They identified architectural remains that were absolutely typical of an ancient temple. Now, to be completely accurate, they couldn't explicitly confirm if a temple was demolished specifically to build the mosque, or if the mosque was just built on top of pre-existing ruins. But regardless, this was a massive game changer. It fundamentally shifted the entire legal battle from a matter of pure religious belief to concrete archaeological fact.
Which brings us to Section 6, the final court verdict. 1,045 pages of judgment. Armed with centuries of old documents, British maps, those new archaeological reports, and endless witness testimonies, the Indian judicial system finally had to make a definitive ruling. And I want you to look at how drastically the legal interpretation shifted over just 1 decade. The 2010 High Court tried to play it safe, attempting to appease everyone with a 3-way split of the 2.77 acres. But as you can guess, nobody was satisfied with that, so it escalated. Finally, in 2019, the Supreme Court delivered the ultimate verdict. They awarded 100% of the 2.77 acres strictly to the deity Ram Lala, granted the Sunni Waqf Board 5 acres of land 25 kilometers away, and the Nirmohi Akara was granted 0%.
To really understand exactly why the Supreme Court ruled this way, we've got to look at the legal concept of adverse possession. In plain English, this is all about continuous possession. In court, possession is king. The judges weren't just looking at history. They needed to determine who maintained continuous, uninterrupted presence and use of the specific site right up to the modern era. Ultimately, that historic 1,045-page Supreme Court judgment rested squarely on 4 concrete pillars of evidence. First, that ASI report proving a non-Islamic-based structure. Second, English travelogues from the 18th century which provided written, third-party proof of Hindu worship. Third, that principle of adverse possession. The evidence showed Hindus never stopped praying there, even when fighting for access from the outer courtyard, while exclusive Islamic possession just couldn't be proven, especially since namaz had ceased there after 1949. And fourth, rigorous witness cross-examination that yielded completely unwavering testimony on the exact location of the birthplace.
So, what was the final resolution? The court mandated that the central government form a special trust to manage the site and construct the Ram Mandir on those 2.77 acres. And in a really clever legal move, they strictly stipulated that the Nirmohi Akara must be incorporated into the management of that new trust. That effectively closed a major legal loophole and brought a definitive, constitutional end to a deeply emotional property dispute that had literally spanned centuries.
It is just incredible to see how a conflict defined by kings, riots, and centuries of fierce faith was ultimately decided by ground-penetrating radar, British maps, and rigorous cross-examinations. As we wrap up this explainer, looking at the sheer scale of this 1,045-page legal journey leaves us to ponder a truly profound question.
Is the law the ultimate remedy for history? Can a modern legal framework truly resolve the emotional weight of a 400-year-old historical conflict? Think about that for a minute. Thanks so much for learning with me today.